Hello everybody, it's your friendly neighborhood elite enjoyer Feral. So this is a tutorial video for all things related to Forge mode in Eldewrito 0.7, from controls, menus, and properties to file management and sharing. On screen and in the description are the timetables for all sections of the video. They are organized such that they will follow the general step-by-step of making and sharing a game mode. In case of any further doubts or difficulties, I highly suggest asking around in any of the Eldewrito discords. I've left 3 of them linked in the description. To start off, let's explain the basics. Every game mode in Eldewrito needs 3 things: a map, a variant, and a mod. While the mod isn't necessary, you will probably find yourself using one of the community-made mods for their additions of props, changes in physics, or even entirely new maps. For this video, we'll be using the ED++ mod. If you're starting out with Forge, I suggest doing the same. Going into the Forge menu, we see a couple of options. The host settings are simply there in case you would like to host your own session with other people, and the game options on the bottom control the traits of the players and editors. The mod option will open a window displaying all of the mods currently installed in your folder so that you may choose one to use while forging. Lastly, we have the map option. No matter which game mode it is, all maps are built on top of the built-in maps. To make a new one, you'll have to first load into any of these built-in maps, where you will then save them as a new map with its own name. So depending on the size, aesthetic, or functionality of the map you want to make, this choice can be pretty important. The game will first spawn you in as a player. The only difference being is you will be able to see Forge objects that you wouldn't be able to normally. To enter edit mode, you can either press the up arrow or 8 in the number pad. There's also an option for it in the pause menu. Most key bindings for Forge aren't in the binding settings, so we'll be showing off all of them for the keyboard. While in edit mode, you will move as a flying orb. You're going to be using WASD to move around horizontally, Q is for descending, E is for ascending. Pressing F will change your flying speed, and holding Shift allows you to fly a little faster. All interactions with the props in the map will be done with your cursor aimed at them, showing a hand symbol to signify this. From here you have 2 actions: pick up with your spacebar and select with left mouse button. Starting with pickup, the prop will begin following your cursor in position. You're also able to rotate the prop by holding left mouse button and pressing either A, D, or moving your mouse as if you were attempting to look around. To activate a rotation snap, press the left or right arrow keys to lower or increase the degrees of the snap. Lastly, selecting an object will create a highlight effect around their silhouette. By selecting more than one prop, all movement from picking them up will be shared, including rotation. While pointing at a prop, you are also able to delete it by pressing delete. If you have multiple objects selected, then deleting one will delete the entire selection. Alright, now that we're through the basic Forge controls, it's time to start making our map. When starting out, it's good practice to first clear out all of these objects for the ones we'd like to add. So, before we touch anything, let's first learn some console commands. You can open the console with the tilde key, that is the key next to the 1 button, and above tab, below escape. And by typing help, it will display all console commands with an explanation to their effects and inputs. In our case, we're looking for a canvas command. As you can see, the text history doesn't let us scroll up all the way to the Forge commands, so we'll first type in this command: console.maxHistory. Pressing enter will show you its current value, and we want to make it way higher, so let's type in the command, and then space, and 500. So when we try using the help command again, scrolling back up will now show 500 lines of text instead of the previous 250. To save this new value, type in the write config command. The forge commands we're looking for aren't variables, so this won't apply to them, but any other you may wish to change should follow this same process. So, to clear all the objects in the map, we start off by using the forge.canvas command. This will delete every single editable object, clearing out the entire budget for us to use. This is a good time to save as a new map through the pause menu. Don't worry about naming it right now, since it's editable in the forge menu anyway. For now, just make sure to have it saved with a different name. Every time you make progress from now on, the Save Changes option will now save on top of the map you created. Now that we have an empty map, it's time to start spawning in objects of our own. By pressing X, you will open the Object Browser menu where you can find and spawn in any and all objects available to you. To spawn an object into the map, all you must do is find it within these tabs and click it. Most items are categorized and grouped together, but something you can do to try and find exactly what you want is to go to the front screen and type in the name of your object, though from my own experience, you'll only really know all objects after exploring the tabs and seeing them all for yourself. Especially with ED++, as the mod, I believe, is continually updated, and I imagine they're going to be adding more objects as time goes on. And that mod adds a shit ton of objects with names that aren't necessarily intuitive. Some of them are just file names. So, feel free to take a moment to kind of just familiarize yourself with, the structure of the objects and stuff, or maybe, type some stuff in, see what comes up. Some props work differently than others. While barrels or pallets have physics and geometry, props such as the FX and the lights are only shown through a small blip that players won't be able to see. The FX props function like a camera filter that is active to those within its range. You may edit things like light intensity, saturation, gamma, and an option for tracing where all geometry silhouettes are outlined with a neon highlight. The light props give off a light beam either in all directions or one direction depending on their type. You can change their color, intensity, and range, as well as making them pulse or flicker. Some props, named devices or machines in the object browser, depending on the use of mods, have functionality when attached to buttons, like gates, roadblocks, also offering things like moving props, like the big wheel from the map Last Resort. As long as you assign them to control channels, you'll be able to separate them, so when you hit one button, one of them activates or deactivates. You can actually change it as well, so they toggle, just turn on and won't turn off, or just turns off and won't turn on. Another kind of prop are the gadgets. These usually have a very specific and mostly self-explanatory functionality, such as the man cannon, the shield door, or the weapon holder. Some props also allow for a scalable option, offering props that can be scaled up to 10 times their original size. Depending on your desired use for the objects in your map, it would be beneficial to edit their properties to tweak their behavior or even physics. Pressing X while aiming at an object will open a menu into that object's properties. For most props, we see the same group of options. GameTypes dictates in what variants the object will spawn in. By default, it's set to all variants. The summary and respawn timer control the time and situation where the object will return to its original position and state. Placed at start dictates if the item will be spawned at the beginning of a round or after its respawn timer is reached, and symmetry for the most part is inconsequential. At last we have the physics option, allowing for either default or phased. Default makes the object affected by gravity and other external forces, while as a phased object it will remain immobile no matter what, but still capable of being destroyed. As a side note, objects that cannot be destroyed will only respawn once they reach a certain despawn timer after becoming immobile. This can be controlled with a garbage collector that will be explained later in the MapTools section. Aside from props, another way to populate your map with geometry is with structures. These are shapes of varying sizes that can be assigned textures. The most utilized are the blocks. When clicking with them, you're prompted to choose the dimensions of the structure, first the width, then the depth, and the length. In its properties, we find an option to change the material. This dictates the texture that this structure will have, where some materials can have special properties, such as the invisible texture, which is only visible to editors. Texture scale allows you to mess around with the position and scale of the selected material in the structure's geometry. Projectile pass-through allows players to shoot through it while still being incapable of walking through it. The impact type dictates the particles and sounds that interacting with this structure will generate. Climbable dictates whether players can move vertically when in contact with the structure. Team barrier controls which teams can move through its geometry. By default, all teams are turned off. When selecting objects, opening one of their properties will give you an option to save them as a prefab. By doing so, you will create a named file that carries all of your currently selected objects as a package. Whenever you'd like to spawn this package of objects, all you need to do is look for its name in the Prefab tab. These files are shareable with other players, but depending on the mod utilized, some objects won't carry over to other people's games. Aside from building geometry, now you'll need to add all the gameplay elements of your map. In the object browser, selecting the gameplay option will give you tabs for props that are fundamental to the functioning of your map in GameType and MapTools, as well as other props that are more directly interactable or to be controlled by the player, such as equipment, weapons, vehicles, and teleporters. Starting with the interactable props, these are props that the player can either pick up to use or enter to control. Their properties are generally the same, the only exception being teleporters that use a receiver and sender system. They come in 3 types. All 3 only work for players, having then a vehicle version that includes players and vehicles, and lastly a vehicle-only version that excludes players. Map tools are used to modify and control map features. They include things such as kill volumes that have a controllable shape and dimension, allowing you to configure which teams it will kill when inside, and whether it will kill vehicles. Garbage collection volumes are used to control the despawn timer of the immobile props to then begin their respawn timer. It allows selecting which props should be despawned and at what frequency. The pre-match camera serves as the view that players will have when the round is beginning. Likewise, at the end of a match, the podium point determines where the top 3 players will be placed in the map at the end of the game. Most importantly, map tools include the map modifier. It controls push barriers, death barriers, and the gravity of the built-in map we're in. It allows for other camera effects that affect the entire map and allows for the editing of the skybox, the weather, and fog. Any map skybox can be utilized with this tool, also being able to change the height of the skybox. As you can see, the skybox is also dependent on the position and rotation of the modifier prop. All of these changes are dependent on this little modifier prop, so once you delete it, all of your changes will also be reverted. But there is no need to keep bringing it around with you because the map modifier menu is available straight from the front screen of the object browser. The last option on the gameplay section is the GameType. These are props used in conjunction with the variant that we are to make for the game mode we're creating. The General tab includes respawn points and starting points that are usable in every variant type, controlling the player's respawn positions for designated teams, and control the direction they will be facing. Starting points are different from respawn points, seeing as they are only used in the beginning of a round as the starting spawn position. These are not necessary in case your map will not have a distinction between the respawn position and the starting position. Different game type tabs like CTF, King of the Hill, and Oddball will include props that control objective items, such as the flag spawn locations and capture points, or the hill markers, the Oddball spawn points, etc. We'll be showing all of the appropriate configurations for the settings depending on your variant of choice, along with the usual other game type objects used for the corresponding mode. Another heads up, when loading back into a map through Forge, these game type props will only appear once you change the game type through the pause menu to their corresponding mode. Alright, so we've basically covered all Forge tools you'll use. So since all things are finished in the map, it's time to save changes and go back to the main menu to start making a variant for our game mode.
Game over.
Entering the Custom Games menu, this is where you can play your maps with an assigned variant to test them out. Here you will see all of your maps, variants, and mod files to be selected, also having the option to edit their names and descriptions by pressing X. To create the variant, we do the same thing as a new map, selecting a built-in variant to then make changes and save as a new one. To make these changes, you must select Edit Game Options. It will open a window showing all of the settings for the variant you selected. Considering all of the different kinds of settings depending on the built-in variant chosen, we won't be going into detail over all of them since they're also mostly self-explanatory. Once you're done with the changes, press X to save your changes. Now having a map, a variant, and the mod we want to use, our game mode is complete and ready to be shared and hosted. So we'll be showing you all the important files, their folders, and how to best share them with someone who would host it for you, or if you would like to add someone else's game mode into your game. In your Eldewrito directory, you should find a folder named Data. Inside of it will be other folders named Game Variants and Map Variants. So if any of these are not found in your directory, then you should create them using this exact naming as shown. In Map Variants, you will find folders with the map names and their sandbox.map files in them. Make sure to keep these files organized in their folders because all of them have that same name. Same thing for variants. In the Game Variants folder, having their files as variant.GameType. To share your game mode, find the folders containing these appropriate files and put them in a zip file like shown on screen. When receiving a zip file such as this, you must only drag the folder with the sandbox.map file into your map variants folder, and the one with the variant.gametype file into your game variants folder. They should show up as a new option in the Forge and Custom Games menu through one of the built-in maps or variants. Side note that the name of the folder won't necessarily correspond to the name of the map or variant. We've gone over just about everything you really need to make and share your own game mode. With that comes the end of the video. In case of any more doubts, we will be answering the comments and any messages on the linked Dorito Discord servers in the description. So in conclusion, personally I think custom games and all these custom maps that people make, they really are the heart of Halo. Like, ever since Forge was added back in Halo 3, all the way up to what it's become now, Forge has been a very important part of the community. It's a very good creative tool. It's very versatile. You can make whatever you want with it pretty much. Without it, I don't think Halo would be what it is today. It's Forge and custom games and, mini games and all that kind of stuff that, brings replayability to it, especially if you have a good group of friends. That's what Halo is about, especially to me. So, yeah, that's everything. I look forward to what you're going to be making with all of this information, and who knows, maybe you'll win the next Forge contest if we do another one, or you're going to be the next, Pablo Picasso of Eldewrito. Just make sure you don't make a fat kid map. That's all I'm going to ask of you. We got too many fat kid maps already.